I'm not going to be, in 1920 by 1080. I can go back to my render setup here. I can say, okay, well, I'm going to be 1280 by 1024. It doesn't change the size of this, but it changes the aspect. You can see, now I can see the bottom of his palm here. Let me, if I highlight this and hit Alt W, okay, it brings that up large. Okay, I say it's going to be 800 by 600. Okay, now I can't see the bottom of the palm. Okay, and then let's try 1024 by 768. Okay, that's roughly the same. Okay, again 1920 by 1080. Okay, it cuts off the hand a little bit. Let's just say worst case 640 by 480. Okay, so you want to try some of these different resolutions that are going to be available in your game, and make sure that none of them have the gun like out of the view or something, where it's like that. If you were to do a weird resolution, because if I do like an actual weird resolution, like width is 800 by 60, you can see what I'm seeing here. It's cutting off the gun, and if I go 80 by 600, you can see that's real weird too. It's way up in the middle of the screen. So this is a good way to tune your camera view to be closer to what you see in UDK. And again, if I hit Alt W to bring it up, and I pick my camera, if you know you're going to be using like a 90 FOV, you want to tune it, or if you're going to be using a 60 FOV, which I believe is what UDK defaults to. I can show the. I'm not going to really see the grid here because my camera's actually on the grid, So it's important that you do this, especially in the one-player view, that you get your camera working here. And I believe if you go to Customize Preferences, you go to Viewports. No, it's not there. It's some place here, which I rarely mess with. Oh, you can go to Layout here, and you can pick these different layouts. So say I want this, I can click it and say I want this to be camera, I want this to be perspective, and you hit OK. Okay, then you come back here and make sure you say Show Safe Frames. Okay, and you can always shrink that, and it's just going to keep shrinking it down. You can keep a general idea of your camera view, and at any moment you can highlight it. I use middle mouse, because if you use left mouse it'll actually click things. Even though I have camera selected, my first left click will pick something. So if you middle click, it never changes your selection. Okay, so at any moment I can hit over here and hit Alt W and give it a check. Okay, and then Alt W again, and I can work full screen here. And then if even in this full screen view, I can just hit V and C, or P, or just C. So just P. All right, will get me back to perspective, and C will get me back to camera. So you can move back and forth, tuning your animation exactly how you want it. So let me check my rotation on this guy and try to even this out to 90s and zeros. Okay, and I look at my camera view, and now the gun is straight up in there. Okay, and if I want to see them both at the same time, I can say, okay, well, I don't want the gun so high. I just want it like that, or I want it off the screen, or I want it in the middle, or I want it aiming. Okay, you can go like that. Bring it close to your aim point. Things like that. So now we can tune the position of the gun, and what I generally like to do is just I don't like it being like that or anything. Okay, you like to keep it down. I'm going to show a little bit of the hand and the gun, so I can see any action that happens with the trigger finger here. And so it's a little hard because I'm working a smaller resolution. But if you're working full screen and you got a nice size monitor, you're okay here to see what's really going on. So let's call this a good idle pose. And really quick, let's just give it a basic idle animation. So this is called my arms skeletal mesh scene, so I'm just going to save that really quick. Again, my assume skin pose is still working, and I can just select one object and tell that to assume the skin pose, and you can see everything else stayed okay. If you want to get everything, you just select everything. The other thing I want to do is I just want to freeze that camera so I don't accidentally pick it. Okay. So now I'm going to save and then save as, and what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to give myself a folder, and I'm going to call it 1P Anims. Okay, and this is going to be one player arms idle. Okay, if you're planning on multiple idle animations, you can call it idle 1, idle 2, idle 3, or whatever you want to name it. You know, hands relaxed or something. Okay, just going to save that. So I got this saved in a new scene. And then what I need to do really is just animate this, and that's it. So for idle, I tend to use 100 frames so that it's nice and smooth and slow. I don't want a lot of movement going on when you're just holding the gun there. Okay. And here we have our time frame slider in max. Okay. You can see that we're at 100 frames max. If I want to change that, I can right click any one of these buttons over here. Okay, and then this brings up my time configuration. So is my start and my end time. Okay, so let's say I only want this to be 60 frames. I hit 60 and then enter. You can see that this will reconfigure, but if I just close this, it goes back to 100. So you got to make sure that you hit 60 and then OK. Alright, so now I'm just working in 60 frames, but I am going to work in 100 frames. Also, you can change your playback rate here from your speed. Okay, quarter speed, half speed, full speed, twice as fast, 4 times as fast. And these can actually come in handy. 4x is actually kind of handy for a run cycle, because if it looks all wacky going really fast, it becomes, if there's something wrong with your animation, it becomes a little more obvious the faster that the animation moves. Okay. So we're just going to keep it at 100, and what we need to do is we need to go into AutoKey, and once I hit that, everything's going to go red. AutoKey is going to highlight red, my frame border is going to go red. Okay, and that's a good indication that I'm in AutoKey mode. Okay, and with this weapon socket selected, I'm going to hit set key here, and that's going to give me a keyframe. Okay, then I can go to the end and I can hit it again. So what I've done is I've locked keys in the start and the beginning that are in the exact same position, and then at frame 50 I'm going to lock in another key. I'm just going to move it a little over, okay, and then at frame 25 I'm going to move it a little down, and then at frame 75 I'm going to move it a little up. Now if I hit play, you can see it's going around in a circle. However, this might be hard to tell. Once it hits the loop point, you can see it makes an unnatural jump. It's a nice smooth curve, and then it goes stop, and then it goes around again. It kind of goes Okay, so what we need to do is we need to fix our curves. So with this object selected, you can actually which I don't know if it's, there's a button here that says open the mini curve editor, and that will actually pop open a little curve window here, which I don't like to do because it's too small for me. I like to right click and just say curve editor, and then what that does is that brings up a window that I can pan around using my middle mouse. Okay, I can zoom in and out with my wheel. Alright, I can drag. These are all the different things that are animatable. Okay, and it's only worrying right now about my weapon socket because that's all I have selected, and it gives me position, okay, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z rotation. Okay, and you can see that my X position never changed. I never moved it forward. Okay, I moved it in the Y, and I moved it in the Z, and you can see that what's happening is that I've got this smooth curve. Okay, and then when I get to the end, I'm kind of slowing down, and then I'm slowed down and speeding up. Okay, this is how much it moves in the Z, and this is my time. I'm just going to explain really quick a motion curve for those who don't know. It's a relationship between how much it moves in that particular axis versus time. So when this line is straight, it means it's not moving at all. So the more horizontal the line is, the less it's moving, and the more vertical the line is, the faster it's moving over the course of between frame 1 and 0 and frame 0 and 20. So this flattening out here is causing that acceleration, and then it's maintaining a decent sine wave going here, which keeps a relatively smooth curve. It slows down at the change direction points, okay, when it goes from moving down to moving up, okay, which is what we want. We kind of want a nice wavy curve. And you can also see that the Y position is, if I continued this, okay, you got to think of it as looping, which I can actually show if I go to controller and out of range types. There's an actual loop here, so you can see it going down the line. It's just going to keep continuing that all the way down the line. These points here are actually kind of slightly changing it's making a little bit of a waviness here. So what I can actually do is I can just delete those, and you can see that now I've got a nice, perfectly smooth sine wave. And this one is not a perfectly smooth sine wave, okay? This should continue. If I go here and go to controller and go change my outer range type to loop, you can see what's happening here. I've got this little mountain ridge, okay? So what I need to do is select these points and make them tangents to linear, which still doesn't exactly fix it because the tangents of these are kind of messing up. Also, this center point I can pretty much get rid of. I still have this little bit of a bump right here, which might be kind of hard for you to tell. So what I truly need to do is actually set the tangents to auto, but I need to set them manually to trail that proper distance until I smooth out that curve. And now when I go to play, it just goes in a perfect same speed circular pattern. Okay, it never slows down, it never speeds up. And if I look at my camera view, you can see that the gun's waving around nicely, okay, and it's smooth. However, it is moving a little far. Okay, there's a little bit too much motion going on in there, and I'm not really digging it. So I'm going to actually come back and bring up the curve editor again. Remember, my expedition I don't need to worry about, and I'm just going to lessen these amounts here by an actually a significant amount. If I pick a point, it actually shows me the time and the value, okay? So I can come here and I can say, okay, well, at 25, if I click off and click it again, well, maybe it's not showing. I think it's showing the value of where my frame slider is. This should be the value, but it seems to be acting weird. I'm just going to basically lessen this curve, and what that means is I need to actually fix my tangents here to be a little bit more smooth again, and I can hit play now, and you can see that it's not moving around as big of a circle. It's moving around much smaller, and while it's playing, I can actually make these edits. So now it doesn't really move around in the Z as much anymore. And the other nice thing is you can, if you come here to zoom the value extents, you can kind of reset your curve to be the total height, so you can see how your curve is laying out. You can see that that one was going up too high. Okay, so now I've lessened my Z amount, and I'm going to lessen my Y amount, so it's not moving around as much. And now you can see it's just kind of bobbing. It's moving a little bit, and the more I drag this up, okay, if you move it left and right, it does allow that, but it does show next to my cursor the time and how much I'm offsetting. And I had offset it earlier, so I want to make sure that I stay at my 50-50 mark. Okay, and I still feel like my Z is too much a little bit. I like my let me zoom that again. Okay, you can see that this, it goes up much more than it goes down. Sometimes it can skip a frame on you. Let me extend that again so I can more easily fix. Every time you shrink it, you can extend it to make sure that you can see clearly your curve. Okay, so now I've got this very subtle motion that I can dial up and down, where the gun is just kind of slightly waving around in this oval circle. And what that does is it just makes it so that it's not like this on the screen. Okay, I've got an idle animation that shows a little bit of movement, and that's pretty much ideal for what we want to have. Okay, so let me go back to my perspective view here. Now let me just show you really quick the difference between what AutoKey actually means. I'm going to take this and just for the sake, I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it down at frame 100. It automatically puts a key there. So now if I go back and forth, you can see I've got this keyframe from 0 to 100. It just moves the arm up and down. So if I hit play, it's going to move down, but once it loops, it's just going to snap back up. Boom. Okay. Now with AutoKey on at frame 50, I can move it way over here, and now it kind of goes out and back in. Okay, let me undo that. With AutoKey off, your movements are actually not being keyed. It's just changing the root position of this thing. It doesn't matter where on the time frame I am. If I move it over here, it moves the arm over here, but it's just moving up and down again. Okay, so AutoKey can actually, having AutoKey off can be a little handy. You can say, well, I like the movement, but I think that the hand's like too much to the left, or it's too much to the right. I can move it out of AutoKey, and I maintain the animation. It's in a lot of ways it's kind of like Matinee, where you can animate a door opening, and then say if you want to move the door around the scene, you just grab the object and move it around the scene. When you come up to it, it's still going to animate in relation to wherever it was. So without AutoKey, you're basically removing where it's going to be in relation. Okay, and I really don't want an animation there, so I can just delete that. Now if you want to drag to delete keys, all you got to do is just hit anywhere on this ruler and it drags. I can't, dragging up and down doesn't change anything, it's just dragging left and right. Okay, you can click a key and drag it. Okay, you can hold shift and copy it. You can hold control and get more. You can hold alt and get less. Okay, you can hold and drag across them and then move them, and like I said, you can copy them, okay, just by holding shift. So you can manage your keys that way, and I can show you what that's actually useful for. Let's say I AutoKey this guy here and I move it down. Okay, and now I got this animation where it moves down, but I want it to move up at the end, and I'm like, well, I need it to loop. I can just take the first key and copy it to the last frame, and now I've got this looping animation where the first and last frames, what I like to do is go to the last frame and hit this arrow, which actually brings me to the loop, and I want to make sure that when I go backwards or forwards that I don't see any change in my scene. If I see a change, if I see something shift, such as if I get rid of that, I go back, you can see that at the end the arm is down. Okay, when it plays in UDK, it's gonna have this snap when it actually goes to replay the animation. Okay. The other thing is to say, okay, well, I moved this down this much at 50. Let's say I want to go exactly half that. Well, I can go to frame 25 and hit a new key and just drag that over frame 50. Okay, and now it only moves half. And then I can do that again, and it's only half of that. And I can basically keep halving it to lessen it, which is kind of a way of doing the, you can see here that I accidentally put it on frame 49 instead of 50. Okay, so I can just keep, and say, okay, let's say at frame 50 it moved, or let's just say I'm going to move this keyframe at frame 100. It moved this far in 100. If you do a little bit of math and say, well, I only want it to move 33%, well, you just go over here to grab frame 33, slap down a key, and then replace your frame 100. Now it's exactly 33% of that amount of movement. Okay? So you can use these, you can use your keyframe, and it's a very standard timeline. There's nothing new to it at all. Okay? From what you're used to. And you can see that the gun moves around, but if I hit play, okay, you can see it waves around just that slight amount. And like I said, if I wanted to, I can always tell it to play faster. Okay? Keeping in mind that UDK defaults your play rate to 1, and it's pretty much 1 for 1, and this is rolling 30 frames per second is what we're dealing with. So right now we're actually at 123.3 seconds. Okay? So that is really the basics of animation. It's quite simple. If you have never animated before, it might be a little weird and confusing, but anybody who has animated anything on the computer ever can pretty much step right into this and shouldn't have any issues whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and encode this part of the video, and then I'm going to actually run through a test export, setting that up and making sure that this stuff comes into UDK and that I can in fact see this animation play, and that the gun does in fact sit in the right position in his hand. Because if I get my registrations messed up on some of these things, if my axes and things aren't collapsed, or my scale's not collapsed at some point back down in the chain of things that I was doing, I could end up with the gun showing up like that, or for some reason I can't undo that, so I'm just going to reopen the scene. Every once in a while, for me, you can see I lost my animation, but it was really easy to do. Every once in a while for me, I'll lose the ability to undo completely. I move that down. If I hit undo, it doesn't do anything. Okay? I'm actually dead in the water. And what's happened is, if this ever happens to you, it might just be my system. Okay, I might have a memory leak or a bad RAM sector or something weird, but this happens to me on occasion, and most often when I have Max and UDK open and I start playing some animations in UDK, I end up, when I go back into Max, I lose my undos, and I even lost some of the fixes I think I did on the skin modifier here. Okay, yeah, I did. So I got to redo that. But I couldn't undo anything, so that's bad. That's worse to me. You need to make sure you have your undos. And the fix is to just save your scene, close Max, and reopen Max, and it's back to fine. Okay, it's just kind of need to reset it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video, let it encode, and while it encodes, I'm going to bring this scene back to what it was. I'm going to fix the skin weights and get that animation back. And then when we get back, we'll be ready to do a test export and import it into UDK and make sure that everything's working good. Okay. Okay, so after reopening Max, I now can move something and then hit undo, and I'm back to good. So that's good news. So now what we want to do is run through this export. So what we need to do is we need to export the arms and the gun separately. So it's really quite simple. I have this handy character saying I have some frozen objects, so I'm going to say yes to unfreeze them, and just for the sake of being safe, I'm going to unhide all and unfreeze all. Okay, kind of want to do that. at any moment that you want to make sure that you're doing your selections. And what I'm concerned with is right now I want to export the arms. So I'm going to pick character, which gets all of my arm bones, okay, including my weapon socket, and let me go to wired view, and I also want to have the arms as well. Now one of the things you got to make sure of is that you have a material applied. It's the same rule as exporting a static mesh. In order for UDK to recognize that it has a material, you want to make sure that you have something assigned. So what I'm going to do is, even though this is the old arms texture, it doesn't matter what I assign here. Okay, you can see that the UVs don't match up or anything like that. It doesn't matter at this point, because I am gonna paint the diffuse texture for this, just so you can see it is actually unwrapped. You can see here. Okay, I do have it unwrapped. If I just go to face it, Control A, you can see it's laid out, so I don't have to worry about doing that again. I can just pick back on skin. Okay. My gun got a different texture, or it got the same one, which is creepy. The skin gun. Okay. Bit of a euphemism there. So I can just assign this a different texture. Let's just, you can pick anything really. It doesn't matter. I just picked this funky normal map and assign that to the gun. Okay, just show the texture. Okay, and before I'm done, and from what you guys are gonna get, you know, these I'll have real textures on this stuff. It's not that big of a deal, because you have to assign your materials in UDK anyway. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get my selection here, character selection, and I'm gonna pick up my arms as well. Okay, you can see I have 43 objects, which is the 42 bones plus my arms. I do not want my IK controllers, and I don't want anything in the weapon selected. Okay, and I just come over to my utilities, I go to Actor X, and I need to pick a path. And I've got my one player anims here, my Glock folder. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder here, and I'm going to call this exports. Okay, I'm just going to call it that. Nice and simple. Okay, just say use path, and you can see if I drag to the end here, it's got the right path, and my mesh file name is going to be my Glock 21 SK mesh, and I'm just going to say save mesh ref pose, and which is save the reference pose. It says unsmooth groups processing, 0 vertices, and then it's going to say that this was written. If you have any problems, it will flag a warning and say that you have an error. So then what I can do now is I can come here, I can pick my weapon root, okay, which is this kind of fleshy toned one that I got here, pink one. Okay, just get the root and hit Control page down, it gets everything else, and I want to get plus the gun. Okay, now if I export it here, it's actually going to be way over here, and when I go to socket it in the arms, this distance here is going to get added as if this socket was out here. Okay, so what I need to do is actually move this back to the origin before I export, and what I like to do is actually save this. Okay, so I'm going to save as real quick, come back up. Okay, I got my one player arms SK mesh, which I can just keep as is, because, and let's just say yes, because I can, it doesn't matter that I have the animation or anything like that, this scene is safe. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go save as, and I'm going to go one player Glock SK mesh. Okay, and what I'm going to do is with the guns, bones, and the mesh selected, I can just hit Control I, and I'm going to delete everything else. Okay, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it to 0, 0, 0. Make sure that I'm not on auto grid. I don't want this to animate. If you look, there's no animation in the gun. It was moving because it was linked to that weapon socket, but it in itself is not moving. Every once in a while it might move a little bit. If it does, you need to actually get rid of that animation. You don't want this to move. You want this to be just 0 at the origin if there's any kind of animation on the gun. Okay, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to move it to 0. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate it in my view to 0 as well, and you can see that the gun actually got flipped on its side. Alright, but I need it to be in, because it got moved in relation to the weapon socket. It had to flip itself down in order to fit in his hands, because if you remember, the hands are out to the side and palm down, and that's why it gets moved like that. So the gun does actually rest like this. Okay, so then I can select all here, and I'm just going to call that Glock 21 SK Mesh and hit Save Mesh Ref Pose, and I get the same thing, and it says it's written. Okay, and I'm just going to hit Save here because it's my Glock SK Mesh, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up back on my arms idle animation, and I'm going to show my perspective view here. Okay, and now what I can do is I can actually export this animation just to test, and again, I only need the bones. Say yes, unhide all, unfreeze all, just to make sure, and then go click my character, which you get my 42 bones, and now I can say my animation file name, and this is going to be 1p arms Glock anims. Okay, I named it arms and Glock because I want to make sure that I am free to have another anim set here if I change this to an AK-47 or an RPG or any of the other 100 billion weapons that exist in the world, a sword or whatever. I'm indicating that these are the arms animations, because remember, we're socketing, so we're separating arms from gun. Okay, so one player arms, and this is the weapon, and this is my anims, and now I'm going to name my sequence, which is just going to be one player underscore idle, and I suggest that what you do is across all your weapons, no matter what weapon it is, that you maintain the same animation sequence names. Okay, because then your programmer can just say, okay, well, here's all the sequences. I got idle, run, sprint, shoot, aim, you know, high five kind of thing, all that stuff, and then no matter what weapon's picked, all you got to do is say, okay, I'm going to switch my anim set. Okay, and I'm just going to run through these same names. So try to keep a consistent naming across multiple weapons. Okay, and then the last thing you need to do is your animation range, which is actually from frames 0 to 100. So it's just 0-100. And then I say digest animation. Remember, I got my 42 bones here selected, and it says, gives me some information. Okay, it digested one player idle. There's a total of 101 frames. Okay, because 0 and then starts 1 through 100. And this is a total number of keys that got generated, which is 4242. Just hit OK. And then you go to Animation Manager, and what you get is your package here, and then you got the animations that you have here waiting. Okay, so if I hit load, it's going to tell me that this animation PSA does not exist yet. Okay, so I haven't saved anything out yet. So what I want to do is I want to select this guy, I want to put it in my package, and then I can just hit save, and it's going to say, okay, this one player arms Glock anims.psa written is now saved. Okay, then I can just hit OK. So if I come over here to hit browse again, go to my exports, you can now see that I have a PSA file. I've also got the Glock 21 SK mesh is here too. For some reason I don't have my arms mesh. I don't know where that ended up. That might have not exported properly yet. Okay, so you can actually highlight any of these and just say use path. It's not going to put that in the path. Okay, it still terminates at exports here, and you don't want to have that final slash here if it shows up. Just get rid of that. Okay, so let me really quick see about what's going on with, we'll call this 1P arms SK mesh, and I hit save mesh for FPose. It did say 0 verts were added, which means, I don't know if that means it didn't export or not. I think it was talking about the smoothing groups, but now I've got it. Okay, one player arms SK mesh. I might have earlier, if you hit cancel, you should clear the field. Okay. So now that I've exported the skeletal mesh for my arms, I've exported the skeletal mesh for my gun, and I've exported a basic idle animation, I now want to go into UDK and I want to confirm that all of this is working, because if this doesn't work, I don't want to go too far with too many animations and then realize something is totally messed up and I have to start over because I have some kind of weird registration issue or something like that. So this being the idle animation, I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. I'm going to pause the video, open UDK, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've got UDK open. Okay, and here's my original package where I have my little arm scale test here. Okay, I can actually delete this now. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit import. Go to my exports. I'm just going to get both of these guys. Make sure that something shows up. Now it's going to ask me where do I want to put it. I was going to want to say mesh. Okay, one player arms mesh. I'm just going to hit OK to all. Put them both in the mesh folder. Okay. You can see if I double click these, that gun is there, and it's on its side, and it's kind of moved down a little bit, which might feel strange. Okay, it did for me at first, but don't worry. And here's my arms. Okay. So now the first thing I want to test, let me get a little bit brighter lighting. Okay, is whether or not my gun's going to fit in his hand right. So what I want to do is I want to go to the socket manager. I want to say new socket, and I want to pick that B weapon socket. Okay, hit OK, and I'm just going to call this weapon socket, and this name is very important. Okay, I don't believe it's case sensitive, but you do need to make sure that you name it right, because your programmer is going to need this to be exactly what it is. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my content browser here and highlight my weapon mesh. I'm going to put that in as my preview mesh. You can see that it shows up right in his hand because it's now moved and rotated based on that socket. Okay, and that does not look bad at all. So what I can do is I can just come here and say import PSA. Oh, I can't do that yet. Hang on. Let me bring up the content browser. I take my arms skeletal mesh here, right click and say create new anim set from mesh. Okay, call this one player arms Glock anims, and I'm going to make a folder here called anims. Okay, still in my same package. Hit OK. It's going to pop up the mesh here, which is still showing the preview mesh in the socket, and now I can import a PSA into that anim set. Go back to my exports folder here, and I just pick my Glock anims PSA. I hit open. Now if I check here to anims and I hit play, you can see that it's the hand's moving, but the gun's not going with it, and that would be panic time normally, but really it just means that that weapon socket was not allowed to move. Okay, it was only allowing for rotational movement, not actual positional movement. So if you uncheck that anim rotation, okay, you pretty much want this always unchecked anyway, except for maybe a special circumstance where you know for a fact that you don't want something to move, or something's moving and you don't want it to. You can just say rotation only. But now you can see that in UDK that the animation is exactly what we had in Max. Now again, if I was moving the slide back and forth on the gun, I wouldn't be seeing that here. Okay, I would only see that on the gun animations, and we are separating the animations of the arms and the gun. And one of the other benefits that I failed to mention is that by separating these, I now actually have the ability to use the same animation system and set, and actually swap out the arms and still maintain all the animations for this gun. Say that this is a scrawny male, character. This is some kind of like wiry little sniper, and then I want to have my beefy, heavy gunner guy, and these are big old fat arms, and I've also got a guy with gloves on, and I've got a guy with a sleeve here. And just so you know, animating a guy that actually has a long sleeve is actually a lot easier than trying to blend a good wrist down the arm, because you can just move the hands inside the sleeve and not really worry about how it all twists up and stuff, because the sleeve wouldn't twist with the hands. But now what I can do is I can say, okay, well, I've got 10 characters. They've all got different arms. Okay, they've all got different equipment on and different types of arms and all that stuff. I can just swap the arms out because they're totally separate, and I no longer have to have a combination of them, because if I had the arms in the gun scene and I've got 10 characters, I need 10 skeletal mesh versions of this weapon. Okay, because I need to make sure that I have the those correct arms. If they've picked the heavy guy, I need to make sure I have the heavy arms in the first person view, or it looks stupid, right? And so if I don't have these separated like this, then I've got to make sure that I have a version of the Glock that's for the heavy. I got to have a version of the Glock that's for the sniper, a version of the Glock that's for the robot, for the girl, for every single thing. But doing it this way, I can just export a bunch of different arms and just tie them all into the same anim set. Now, if I have if the arms are completely different across one character, say these are human arms, and then the next one is like this wavy tentacle that wraps around the gun, some kind of alien with little tentacles, that is weird, I'm just trying to picture that, which is making my brain go crazy. But that would require a completely different skeleton. However, if you use the same type of system, even though you can't use the same anim set, because it'll have a completely different skeleton. If you can see, here's my skeleton here. I can actually show how the skeleton's all relating. Okay. I can still put that gun in some weird tentacle monster's hand, because if I give him that weapon socket bone, which is a pyramid, then it works perfectly fine. Now you can say, I got a warning here, one player idle needs to be recompressed. That's because I import the animation, then I said to uncheck animation. If you're worried about that, you can just like re-import it and just say replace, yeah, and then the warning's gone. So what's good now is that I'm pretty much ready to just run through my animation pipeline and animate all the animations which I want, and just import them under the PSA. And then for some animations, for the most part for the gun, it's just following the arms, which really just means that there's no animation for the gun. It's just there. Okay, I can have him flip it up and down and throw it back and forth between his two hands, and drop it and pick it up and point it at his own face and do whatever he wants with it. As long as I don't tell him to move the slide back, I don't need any animations for the gun. I just need the gun there, because it doesn't actually move. Okay. Now if this gun had like a piece of ribbon or something, or something that needed to move around, like say that this is a sniper rifle and it has a bipod. Let me show you that really quick. If I go to my weapons here that I've got going on, and just kind of show some of these, I've got this sniper rifle, and if you look at my gun anims for this, okay, this actually has a bipod. If you look at my anims, which I need to make sure. Actually, I don't think I ever imported it. I should have. Oh, okay. So in the one-player view, I didn't worry about it because this bipod was actually out of the way. But in my three-player animations, you can see that I'm actually moving. I need to move the bipod on the three-player guy based on what's happening in the three-player animation. I animated these together. Okay, so when it's idle, it just kind of swings back and forth a little bit. Okay, and during crouch, it kind of swings a little bit more to move in and out of the way, crouch, walk. During fire, you can see that if I don't, it kind of shakes a little bit. Okay, idle just moves it a little bit. So if you have a moving piece on your gun, you need to export more animations. You know, almost probably an animation for the gun for every animation that you do for the arms. But if you're working on something like this M16 here, okay. You look at the anims that I got for this, it's just reload. That's all I have, because there's no other pieces on this gun that I've actually animated moving other than the mag coming out. All the rest of the animations are driven by the arms, so I don't need them. I just got the one, okay? And this, like I said, earlier, this syncs up with what the arms are doing, okay? So there's no reason for me to have any more animations for it. Even when it shoots, there's nothing that moves. Now, the one of the weapons here, like this 1911, if I go to the gun animations here, which is showing the wrong preview mesh. Okay, here's this 1911. Alright, it's a Colt. Now look at the anims for it. It has a fire animation because the trigger and the hammer move, and then the slide moves. Okay, and that's all it does. And you can see it's only 21 frames, and you can see that he pulls the trigger, then the slide jams back as he lets go of the trigger at the same time. Okay, and then that recocks the hammer. Okay, if you look at the hammer, it slams forward and then gets pushed back with the slide. Okay, and that's all it is. And again, the reload, the mag comes out, and I'm going to show you here. If you notice, you don't really see the bullet in there because it's moved down. But as we get down, you can see that the bullet comes up, and then when it comes back in, the bullet's in there. Okay? And we're going to do the exact same thing for the Glock. Alright? And the animations that we actually are going to want to need are pretty much listed right here. Okay? We already got our idle done. Okay? We need a run. We need a sprint. Okay? We need an aim. Alright? Originally, we could not do we couldn't reverse animations. If we told an animation to play from script with a -1 speed, it just took it as a 1 speed and it played forwards. Apparently they fixed that at some point in one of the new releases, which actually could be the last release of UDK, and we can now from code call an animation with a negative value and it will actually play backwards. So that what we had originally was we had a 2 aim, which brought the gun up. Okay, you can see that the arms look all wonky, right? I mean, nobody's going to hold a gun like that. You're going to break your own teeth. However, in the one-player view, you need a lot of times to do unnatural movements, because really all you're worried about is what it looks like in the camera. Okay, you're not going to be worrying about what's going on in the out of the scene. Okay, so if I aim this, okay, you can see, all right, and I can reload it, right, and it's all very simple. Okay, I've got all these weapons here. Same thing. Just do my aim. Okay, pick a different one. My equips are very slow. I need to fix that and speed it up. But here you can see the pistol. Okay, it might be out of the frame rate, Okay, you can see we do a little bit of movement on it. We've got work, we've got left to do to tweak. And one thing is that these two weapons, these two pistols, are actually using the entirely exact same set of animations. They're identical. The only difference is that their reload animations are different. Okay, so if I reload that guy, fire is exactly the same, but if I reload that guy, it's slightly different because of the mag position and things like that. We wanted to make sure everything was working okay. So, aside from our equip animations being a little too slow, okay, everything else is pretty basic. And you can see I got, when I move, it moves a little bit more, so you can see the weapon stops. Okay, we've got a little camera trail going on, so if you move left and right, the weapon kind of drags behind it. If I sprint, you can see that it moves. Okay. Same thing with this gun. If I sprint, right, we originally had a to sprint and from sprint, so we get this little bit of an unnatural jump until we fix the code to not call that anymore, but that's no big deal. And again, I can shoot it and then I can hit reload. Okay, it's all working out pretty good. The reload on this is awful. I'm going to fix it. Okay, the arm comes out in an ugly position. So a lot of times you need to play your game to really know what the problem is. Okay, you need to see it in action, and then you can go back and you can fix your timings and stuff. Okay, so the animations that we need are here. Let me bring up the content browser. So we're going to have idle, we're going to have run, sprint, we're going to have to aim. Okay, we're going to have equip and unequip. And if you wanted to, we can bring the gun up and then cock it every time you equip it. We're going to have reload. Okay, we're going to have a regular hip fire, alright, where the gun fires from his hip. And then we're going to have an aim fire, where it fires from his aimed view. And again, that's pushed it right into the camera so that it looks good. And like I said, the arms look all crazy, like he's scared of something, but in the camera view you don't see any of this. It's all out of the view. Okay, so you just worry about what's in your camera view. Now for third person, that's entirely different. If I show this and I show the aim fire for this, okay, this is previewing the wrong mesh, alright, but you can see that that's got to be posed properly, but you don't see yourself do this fire animation. Okay, that doesn't happen. So okay, you see I did little minor movements in the mouth and things like that, where he kind of grimaces a little bit, tightens his mouth, stuff like that. So we can add all those little subtle details and everything. And if you're a really good animator, you probably don't need to be watching this in the first place, unless you want to figure out how to get everything into UDK, if that's your purpose. Basically, I just showed you right there. In essence, it's all going to be in the hands of your programmer from here on out. And like I said, Paul from my team will be handling that side of it. So really what I'm doing now is just going to be tying up everything, completing the animation set, the whole system, and then my end is done. I'm going to hand it over to him. Obviously I have more work to do in terms of painting the textures and all that stuff, and there's other stuff we can do too, like our muzzle flash particle and our shell ejection particle and the decals for hitting on the wall, and maybe some kind of a tracer or something, which we haven't gotten working yet, so we have to experiment on that before we get the best system for having good tracers. But really the animation is set up now. I can now easily take this, which is arms idle, which I've already exported, and just save this as, and I can say, okay, now I'm going to do my arms run and hit save. Okay, and then I can just, with this is the only thing that has any keyframes. I can just dump these keyframes, and let's say I want my, I need to choose a length for that run animation. I don't want it to play too slow, so I'm just going to say it's going to take 30 frames, which is going to be 1 second. AutoKey this. Okay, and make sure that I always, I usually slap down that last keyframe. This is a looping animation. The only one I don't do it like that is for reload. Now what you can see here is, even though that I have the same animation copied, if I move this real slow, you can see that I've actually got some movement going on even though there shouldn't be. And the reason for that is because of what I was actually showing you earlier. If you look at the curve in the Z, you can see that these tangents are still pulled, okay, because I haven't actually deleted these frames. Okay, so if I just set them to linear and then set them to auto, then the movement's gone. Okay, so if you ever have movement where you don't think you should, check your curves, because you might still be having some kind of motion in your curve like that, because the tangents are, even though they're just 2 points, the tangents are pulling it away. So really all I got to do now is just say, okay, well, for run I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to move it to the side, and then halfway of this, which would be either 7 or 8, okay, so 7.5, no matter if you go to the front or the back of that. It's going to move it up, okay, and then at 22 or 23 I'm going to move it up again, and all it's going to do, if I play it, it's just going to bounce back and forth, boom 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 boom, okay. And if I hit play and I hit my camera view, okay, that's him running, okay, which is not a sprint. It's kind of a brisk, like a jog, right? Run is just run. There's a difference between run and sprint. And you can see that if I want to check my my curve editor and just to see what's going on here, that my X position, I'm still not moving it forward and backwards. Okay, my Y, I can pretty much get rid of those that are breaking that curve. You can see that at one point it goes up and then it goes up a little bit more. So if I want to make sure that the up and down here are the same, I can just hit that. You can see it's and I maintained a double sine wave, okay. But again, if I show the out of range to loop, you can see that there's no unnatural shifts in direction or breaks, okay. I have a good sine wave, so it's a nice smooth, okay. So it goes and it slows down a little bit at the bottom, slows down a little bit at the top, okay. So it's kind of going like that. And the Y position is also, it's just twice as big because it's just moving across the whole thing, okay. And this will, and if you notice, the very first frame of this is actually the exact same exact thing as I had in the start of my idle. And that's important when you're making animations for games, that every animation start and stop at the exact same pose. And this is best shown in 3-player, because if I show my idle here, okay, he's in this particular pose, okay. Now if I show hit on the first frame, you don't see any difference. Hit back, hit head, hit idle. If I play this, you can see he does his whole idle animation, but he comes back to the same frame. If I scrub this really quick, okay, I'm all the way to the right and I slap it over to the left as quick as I can, there's a little jerk in the animation, but he's in the exact same position, okay, it's looping. If I do the hit, it's the same thing. He does his little hit, and then he goes back to the exact same pose. You gotta make sure that your start poses and your end poses are all exactly the same as your idle pose. With jump, you can see there's a little bit of change, because he's actually starting to do a jump, and this is actually a mistake on my part, okay. When he goes to do that jump, I messed that up, okay. Equip, we also have an equip pose. Every single weapon that goes to equip starts in this pose here. And in 3-player, these will actually blend. So if he's in some other pose like this, and then I say, okay, start to play the equip, it's actually going to animate like that to that pose. It's not going to just snap to it. Okay, so all of these, you can see reload, okay, and idle, which is right here. You see no change in the animation when I pick between these animations. Okay, when I hit run, he totally changes position, but it does a blend. Okay, so now if I play reload, he goes through and does the whole reload animation. You gotta remember, this is the pistol, so this is why I'm looking all messed up. I should have the pistol previewed here. Okay, but he ends and starts at the same pose. If I click idle on the last frame, it should be exactly the same. Okay, first frame and last frame are the same. And same thing on reload. First frame, last frame, first frame, last frame, first frame, last frame. Okay, you just move your mouse over as quick as you possibly can to really see that. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so walk is obviously got its own loop point. Okay, first and last frames are exactly the same. Okay, to aim starts off, it's exactly the same thing, and then he brings it up, okay, to his chest and then forward. Alright, now I'm not going to be covering the 3-pillar animations, but if I look at the 1911 animations here and I go idle and then I show reload, there's no difference. Okay, when I play idle, it moves around a little bit, but again, first and last frames are exactly the same. Reload, first and last frames are exactly the same. Okay, if I play it slow, he actually does the reload, but it ends at the last frame. It's got to end at the last frame. Okay, and also my equip animation ends at the exact last frame that the idle does. So if I'm on the last frame here and I switch between equip and idle, okay, there should be no difference. There's a little difference because it's moving my time slider to the same thing. Okay, equip, idle. Okay, now they're at the ends. Okay, equip, idle, equip, idle. Nothing's changing. Now if I go to the first frame and I go to unequip and idle, it's the same thing, because unequip goes from idle to putting it down. Okay, and equip and unequip are essentially just reverses of each other. It's just a reverse animation. But like I said before, we didn't have the ability to actually reverse an animation. And however, sometimes your equip and your unequip don't want to be the same. And a good case of that would be the 3-player M16 that I got here. If I show equip, okay, he starts out doing nothing. He actually has to pull the gun down and then catch it, but and unequip, okay, he actually has to push it back and then follow it. Okay, it's very similar, but it's not exactly the same. They're different. Okay, so equip and unequip aren't always exactly the same, but they should be very similar. And for one player, it's really just a matter of really just come in here and really this is good enough for unequip, and that's good enough for equip. You know, just move it down for unequip, move it up for equip. I mean, like I said, unless you wanted to bring it up and have him cock it, or if it was on his back or something and you wanted it to come from up here, you know, you can have it come down into the scene and then come down and up or something like that. Okay, but really, for the most part, you know, equip is very basic. To aim is also very basic. It's just a movement over the course of a couple of frames, which is pretty much 10 frames. So I'm going to save this really quick, and again, all I got to do is come to my selection set, hit character, okay, and all I got to do, so I'm still on the arms, is just change this to run, okay, and then change my range 0 to 30. I hit digest animation, and when I hit my animation manager, if I hit load here, you can say it loaded the one sequence. It was already loaded, but all I got to do is just take that and move it over and hit save. Okay, if it gives you some kind of error, says the inconsistent bone count and all that stuff, at some point you may have added some kind of control object or something. You got to make sure that you don't rearrange your hierarchy. To say, okay, well, for a little while I want this to follow this because I want him to be holding the gun with two hands. I can't just link this to it because it's gonna rearrange my hierarchy, and then it's going to tell me, oh, you know, you're inconsistent. You have an inconsistent number of bones. Your hierarchy is broken. I cannot do this. It won't work. You know, so it'll fail, and it'll say like, oh, you got 99 bones in this one, and you're trying to bring in 101 bones. You know, what are you thinking? So what you do is once you set your hierarchy, you never ever use this button ever again to relink anything. If you do need to link something, okay, you're going to do it all in constraints. Okay, any one of these constraints is going to work perfectly fine. Link, look at, you know, orientation constraint. Use those to your heart's content. It doesn't. It's what I like to call them is the difference is it's a soft link. Okay, if I link this to here using hierarchy, it's a hard link because I've actually physically linked it to it. Okay, so what I like to, it's like a hard attach in UDK. Okay, but if I use just this constraint, I like to think of it as a soft link, and now you can see that if I move this, that the other arm goes with it. Okay, and all of these are actually on this motion tab. Okay, you can see if I drag this up that I'm showing my link parameters, and that I'm linked to the weapon socket, and it's starting that link at frame 0. So what I can actually do is say, okay, at frame, I got this movement, right? At frame 15, I want to link to world. So you can see it moves with the gun, and then at frame 15 it stops moving with the gun. Okay? Because at frame 15 I'm linking to the world. And that's really, really handy when it comes to stuff like reload, where you need this hand to come over and grab a mag and then be able to put the mag back in, or have this hand come over and grab the slide and actually do the cocking of the slide, and you don't want it, you want it, you know, him to actually grab it and stick with it so it's a perfect connection. You can use link constraint combined with, excuse me, an orientation constraint on his wrist, and if you do both of those, you effectively have this hand following the gun exactly the way this is. You remember, this has the link constraint, okay, to the weapon socket, and also his wrist bone be wrist. Okay, you can see, oh well, I don't have any constraints here. It's because it's highlighting my position parameters. But if I check rotation here, you can see I have an orientation constraint, which is also following the weapon socket. And this is a little bit different in the way it's animated. It doesn't happen at per frame. You can actually dial it up and down to say, okay, I only want to follow a little bit, so you can have it kind of trail off of something. But for the most part, you want to do, you know, 100%. And at frame 0, it's 100%. At frame 30, it's still 100. There's no keyframes forward at all. And I'll explain all this and the workflow for getting all that working as we do the reload animation. So again, you do not, you know, if you have issues exporting, at some point you might have relinked something, and if you did, you got to go back to one of the animations that's working, and you got to rearrange your hierarchy to match that. Okay, so I can just take this guy, and I can just delete these links. It's not going to follow anything now. Okay, so I'm already exported here, so I can save this scene. I've already got my run, and I'm good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video now, and when I come back, I'm going to try to blast through the rest of the animations, and then I will actually be pretty much done with my part of the tutorial. I'll have a summary of all that we've done, a little bit here and there, just to make sure that, you know, if you've skipped through some of the videos and you haven't watched everything, which I don't blame you. It's been quite a journey. This is a lot of hours. Then, you know, and you at some point you might have missed something. You know, I can maybe try to explain at the end, you know, all of the steps that we've actually done, you know, in terms of the modeling and the rigging and the animation and all that stuff. But next video will be either the last or the second to the last video, and it'll just be going through all the rest of the animations that are needed and bringing them into UDK just to double check that everything's working, which it's going to work. Our system is set up. It's perfectly fine. We no longer need to export the skeletal meshes unless we need to make edits, and we can do that at any moment. We can go back and fix that and just re-export skeletal mesh. It's no big deal. And there you have it. So I'll see you in the next video.